Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. So, as class mentioned, my name is Scott Mackey, SVP of, actually it's even more than that, but we got to shorten the title, Head of Customer Success at Adlib, one of the founders that have been there since the beginning, obviously. This session actually brought back some, this last couple of days brought back some interesting memories too. The very first time I was doing one of these presentations was almost 20 years ago at a PDF event hosted by a different vendor, but back then it was actually emceed by Carl Adlib, which some of you know from Foxit. So just it's nice to see Carl at these events. The other thing that it reminded me of too is that all the talk about accessibility over the last couple of days, I actually spoke at an event in Ottawa a couple of years ago, and in the audience there were some people that had different disabilities, some people that had hearing that couldn't hear anything. So we actually had some people doing some sign language for the speech I was doing at the time. And one of my goals is to slow down. I speak very quickly in general, so at this one session it was actually kind of funny, the poor lady doing sign language trying to communicate what I was doing at the front of the room, turned around and actually had to tell me to slow down physically because she couldn't sign fast enough for the speed I was going at the session. So it was funny. Today I want to talk a little bit more about. It's a little less about the output side of PDF. A lot of what we've been hearing the last couple of days has been around PDF 2.0. It's been around print output. It's been around accessibility, universal PDF UA, those kinds of things. I want to go through a couple of examples based on some case studies that we work with our customers on about some of the other ways that organizations are getting business value from their PDF workflows, essentially. So just by show of hands, the split in the room in terms of people that are PDF vendors, technology people versus users. Who's a PDF vendor in the room? Somebody who either builds, sells, or recommends PDF technology? So a good chunk. And how many are actually on the user side? Okay. How many are from insurance? Nobody from insurance. How about government? A couple there. Manufacturing. Okay, just trying to get a sense, because some of the stories I've got are from different industries and whatnot, so I wanted to just get a sense of who we had in the group. I want to encourage anybody that if you hear something that you've got questions about, feel free to raise your hands. The class has a microphone, he'll race and track you down. So you'll see that I don't actually have much reference to PDF for the first few slides, and that's on purpose. So this is a quote from Gartner, and it's really about the broader challenge that organizations have with their content. Let's ignore PDF for a minute. So one of the things that they had commented on is that most organizations neglect their data, they keep everything forever, they bury their heads in the sand when it comes to information risk. To change the situation, CDOs, chief data officers, and other information governance leaders must work to change people's attitude to information and its relevance to business outcomes. So there's some really cool things that people are doing with PDF technology that I'm going to go through today that touch on some of those topics as well. This is also from Forrester, it looks like, so one of the other industry analysts that are out there. Essentially, it's just analyzing how many people, how many organizations have actually failed to unlock the value in their content and to actually make it actionable. So there's actual valuable IP, there's valuable information in content, there's also a lot of risk in content as well. So there's a big move, obviously, in all kinds of industries to get a better sense of their content, and PDF does play a pretty important role in that, as you'll see in a couple of minutes. This was originally a PowerPoint, so it was lots of animation, kind of all flattened here in this PDF output. But the message on this was that there's a lot of dark data in an organization. So everything from the highly structured information, the things that content that's stored in databases like your CRM or your ERP system, all the way to your unstructured content, so your CAD files, your emails, your Word documents, spreadsheets, all of that content there's massive volumes of it, of course, in an organization, and a lot of it is dark. I think the next slide actually touches on the volume. Yeah, so some people say it's 80% of that content is actually not findable. We've heard that referenced in a couple of sessions over the last couple of days. One of our big life sciences customers talked about the amount of dark data they had in their organization. We're talking petabytes of content. They were saying they've got 18 copies of any one file. If you think of the file that you've got in your content management system, it gets emailed as an attachment, it gets stored locally, people are now uploading stuff to the enterprise file sync and share systems. There's all kinds of duplication, and if that information is sensitive content, the risk to an organization can actually be very, very high. And I'll talk about one of those stories in a couple of minutes as well. So basically, there's a lot of dark information, a lot of dark content, and PDF can play a role in actually helping uncover that information. if you put the right tools and processes in place. This is John Mancini. He's the former CEO, I guess, of the AIM organization. That's sort of the larger information management umbrella organization. So PDF is a component of a company's overall information management strategy. These guys are the parent organization, kind of like a PDF association for all of those content management vendors. And this is some of the stuff that he's been talking about as well. How content is prepared and created now will have a direct bearing on how machine processable it will ultimately be in the future. So in some of the sessions we've been talking about here the last couple of days, it's not just about how machine processable it will be, but how consumable is it by the end user. So this is where the accessibility comes in, the proper tagging, those sorts of things. What kinds of things can you do to enrich your content so the users themselves can consume it? But the stories I'm talking about today are actually that if you're uncovering and unlocking the value in the content, you can actually feed it into some high volume machine processing types of workflows. So one of the use cases I'll talk about in a couple of minutes is a customer where they're feeding content, not just structured content, but all this unstructured content into Watson to do some high-level analytics and basically derive additional business value from that, be able to make faster business decisions because you're creating content that is machine processable, and using PDF is one of those methods that they're using. This one is from Forrester as well. So in terms of the kinds of business problems that people are trying to solve, again, not PDF specific, but hopefully you're starting to see, or you'll start to hear some of the ideas about how PDF can be used to solve some of these things. But these are identified as some of the critical priorities for organizations. Again, not from a PDF perspective, but from a business perspective. I put some arrows beside some of these because that's where we've seen a number of use cases, again, for PDF-related technologies, whether it's ours or somebody else's. Improving the experience of customers, reducing costs, better compliance with regulations and requirements, accelerating digital business, and better leveraging big data analytics in your business. So all of these, we've got customer use cases. So if one of these things sounds familiar to you, if you're in industry, then PDF does play a role in that. It may not be one that you're thinking of right now, but is definitely one. Any questions so far? Okay. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. So as I was touching on before, the idea is that an organization has a lot of content, but what organizations are trying to do is actually move it from just oversight, and this is put it behind a tripwire, lock it in a repository, don't clean it up, don't make it searchable. You know, that's basic oversight. If you can get it all into a repository, that's step one. Most organizations haven't even done that yet. I think the stats are 70 to 80% of an organization's unstructured content is stored outside of the repository. So some companies are a little bit short-sighted and they figure, as long as I can comb it all off of my networks and all my legacy systems and put it in my storage system, whether that's an open text or a Documentum or a SharePoint or what have you, they think they've got control over it. That's really just oversight. You've not got the stuff there, but you've got all kinds of mess in there, right? You've got duplicate content, you've got information that's not properly classified, it doesn't have the proper tags or metadata, so it can't be found. Findability of content was a pretty common theme from a lot of the sessions over the last couple of days. You might have some archival, you might be able to do some basic searching, but you've really only achieved the basics of getting some information governance practices in place. What we're talking about doing is leveraging some of these technologies, PDF, OCR, classification, content management. These kinds of technologies and capabilities can start to turn that iceberg, I guess, of unusable content into some valuable insights and eventually some foresights. So I was reading an article a couple of years ago, which was probably last year. Royal Bank of Scotland was talking about this too, where their goal was to improve or to deliver a superior customer experience so that they weren't losing business to other banks, for example. They realized that they had content spread about any one customer, spread across multiple systems. You know, their mortgage files, their insurance content, their investments, all of this information was under the one umbrella of the bank, but stored in separate systems, and they couldn't actually do any analytics across those systems to derive some new value for that customer. They couldn't, at the time, basically say, you know what, you bought this product here, it actually has insurance coverage for these other two products. You don't need to be paying for it here. So delivering some added value proactively to the customer is one of these things that getting access to all of that content across your organization can actually help drive some additional foresight into those things from a customer experience perspective. So as I mentioned before, oversight is really just knowing what and where your content is. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of companies that haven't got a clue. There's some real risk in this as well, where we're working with one of the top 10 banks in the States, and they've actually got board level visibility in terms of the risk that's actually spread in the content across their organization. They don't really know all of what they've got. They haven't got control over their content, and it's got board level visibility. But they're not looking to just get control over it from an oversight perspective. They're actually looking to get some additional insight. So you can imagine the amount of contracts and things that a bank would have spanning decades, spanning geography, spanning languages, getting insight into all that contract, not just so that you can automate a workflow, for example, but that you can actually properly assess risk is something that is hugely valuable for an organization. So the intelligent extraction of content produces better data to identify trends and make better decisions. So PDF, as you can imagine, is playing a role in some of these things. Moving up to foresight, being able to strategically leverage data with analysis that proactively solves business challenges, improves those customer experiences. So not just delivering stuff mobile, making stuff accessible, having it properly tagged, but if you're consuming this information, you're leveraging all of the content and information you have in your organization and proactively delivering a new service or delivering a recommendation to a customer, you're going to be improving that customer experience and ideally driving additional customer retention and new customer acquisition as a result of that. This slide is really about the visibility that these use cases actually have in an organization, that it's not just about the IT anymore. These actually have boardroom level visibility. You know, these companies have CEOs that are showing up in the news. They've got stories being released about personally identifiable information that results in a news story that affects their stock price. So getting a handle on their content has got board level visibility now. So deduplication of content to make sure that you've got it all cleaned up, you know where your information is, and you've removed any duplicates and risk there. Asset reuse is a big one. So one of the stories I've got coming up is around an energy company and their ability to leverage previously researched content so that they can avoid having to recreate that research down the road. Being able to redact, collaborate, and improve transparency of information. So redaction plays a role in terms of control over that personally identifiable information. So you can imagine some of the tools that are available allow you to redact. But what if you don't know where that content is? This is one of these files that somebody has downloaded locally and shared using their enterprise Dropbox, for example. So if you haven't got that stuff properly controlled, then you're at risk. Even if you have the technology that's able to do redaction, you need to have the processes in place to control these things. Customer processing, contracts intelligence, classification we'll touch on a little bit later on, being able to deal with big data and incorporating unstructured content into your big data workflows, achieving compliance. E-discovery is something that we haven't talked too much about in the last couple of days. This is a huge challenge for big organizations. They have to divulge information as part of litigation, and knowing where the content is critical for that. PII, huge thing obviously in Europe, but globally, people are concerned about not just personally identifiable information, but NPI, the non-public information. So that could be commercial value, could be formulas, non-proprietary proprietary information that's locked in your content. That needs to be identified and protected as well. Classification for policy. So basically the message is that these stories that we're all hearing in the news these days are giving proper access to content, boardroom level visibility. It's not just a technology problem for the back room. Now PDF, the first PDF slide. So the idea here is that PDF is this great intermediary. It's a standardized format that you can take basically any source format and get it into PDF and then start to do some of these wild and wonderful things with it. Whether it's tagging it for accessibility, whether it's making it searchable so that the indexers can grab it, whether it's just for that consumption in terms of the traditional use of PDF where it gets published out. A lot of the stories that I'm talking about aren't about the output side of PDF. This is about using PDF as one of those critical formats for internal workflows or for the ingestion of content, some of the cool things that the PDF enables organizations to do. So a lot of my stories aren't really about the output side of things. So we don't talk about PDFX. There's others that have talked about that. I don't even talk about making content accessible necessarily, but tagging content, fixing the flow of content, these are all essential technical capabilities that you can achieve with PDF that do address that are required for some of these business stories that I'll talk about in a minute. So as I mentioned before, you've got huge volumes of content. PDF can be used to help deduplicate that content, both from a hash perspective, but also going deep inside the files once they're rendered to identify what is a duplicate. So you can have a Word version and a PDF version of a Word document, or PDF version of a CAD drawing, and you can identify some of these things to do some deduplication. So we've worked on some projects where it was an energy customer that for one of the first projects was about 800,000 files, and they found that there was 35% duplication in that content. So you can imagine just basic level deduplication. If you can clean that stuff up, not only reducing the size or scope of the project in terms of further understanding what you've got, but your storage costs, everything else is much lower. You know, we've got some customers that are doing this stuff prior to moving it up into the cloud. You know, storage is cheap until you have to move to the cloud. Obviously, you want to clean it, put up only what you need, get rid of all the redundant, obsolete, trivial information, remove all the, well, I guess redundant is duplicate, get all that content out of there before you move it from one repository to another, or moving it from on-prem up to the cloud. So we found PDF being an interesting format for that. One thing I will mention, though, is that some of these stories, I've got just 3 that I'm going to go through, there's all kinds of them, but PDF is also not the be-all and end-all. We've got some customers that actually use PDF as one of the intermediary steps to achieve a particular business goal, then they toss the PDF. They don't never use it again. It's just an interesting, sorry, that shouldn't be done there. It's a critical interim format almost to do some of these advanced business operations on so that you can get the value of the content. But they may not want the PDF. I'll tell you that 9 out of 10 do. They still want, PDFA so they can put it in their archive. They want to use the PDF as the container, even put the original file in there, treat it as it's, take advantage of all the wonderful features of PDF, but some don't. Some of these business users that we're talking to now, when you mention the idea that PDF is part of the solution, it raises all kinds of questions. So if you back that out and just talk about the value that PDF delivers, which is it creates a sort of standardized format from which you can do all of these other things, then the conversation goes much smoother. That's just for some customers. But, there's a lot of education that's required. And at the end of the day, they're looking for a particular business outcome, not the technology used to solve it. So I'm a little bit less all PDF all the time, but it is an essential part of what we do and what we offer in terms of the value to the customers. And not just us. This is meant to be a vendor pitch. All of this stuff is about the format and the value that PDF can deliver, regardless of the tool set that you use. So these are some of the target industries. Obviously, very content-intensive, highly regulated, huge volumes of content, huge variety of content. There's a lot of intellectual property and value in the content for these industries, not just these, obviously, but others. But they're also very risk-averse in a lot of ways. They've got content in there that has personally identifiable information or has other things in it that makes it really important for these markets. So we find these ones to be the most responsive, the first to move, the first to leverage technologies like including PDF and some of the other content management tools to solve these business problems. I know in Europe, you're a little further ahead in terms of the digitization of business. In the Americas, there's still quite a few that are stuck in paper. Sorry, I'm scratching my nose. But regardless of the industry or the geography, these are the kinds of roles now that are interested in some of these technologies and what they can do. So it's getting right up to, as I mentioned, board level, but certainly C-level visibility. There's an article I read a few years ago that talked about, there used to be glass ceiling, now there's this glass floor, where the C-level executives are actually interested in what's going on in terms of the plumbing, in terms of the workflows and the business process management, the technologies and tools being used, because it's having meaningful business value at the higher level. So it was just an interesting article with the glass floor as opposed to the typical glass ceiling. Legal, we talked about knowledge management, infrastructure, records and information management, information governance, compliance. These are all the kinds of groups that are now talking about this stuff. It's not purely an IT discussion anymore. These are the kinds of people that we find are involved in the conversation. So going in there, you have to talk more about the business value and less about the technology. But obviously, there's aspects of PDF that are really important. But if you talk about the universality of PDF, the fact that it can be searchable, the fact that it's true to its original format, all of these things, those are the values that these business people are more interested in than the specifics of the technology itself. This image here is actually from the information governance initiative. So this is moving out a little beyond just strictly content management. This is about overall information governance and strategy. But I find it's a really useful image. I'm trying to use a little laser. No, it's the pencil laser. Never mind, I'll just point. It's an interesting overview of the overall information management landscape, I guess, that an organization is dealing with. So you've got the business groups that care about increasing profitability. You've got privacy and security people that are obviously concerned with the risk embedded in their content. IT group is often concerned with efficiency, improving the overall process efficiencies, cost efficiencies, and things like that, obviously. The records group are also really keenly interested in the amount of risk in an organization. Legal as well are tasked with managing the risk that the company has in terms of exposure to information, but also things like contractual risk if you're an insurance company. In the center, they talk about sort of standard information lifecycle. Nothing really advanced there. It's a version of a diagram that I used to draw every time we hired a new employee or every time I talked to a customer. But it's basically content gets created and used. It gets stored and secured. There's hold and discovery. There's a missing piece there in terms of collaboration and management that I would put in. And then there's a retention and archival and ultimately disposed of when appropriate. So sort of a life cycle of content. And I've got 3 stories or 3 case studies that I wanted to talk about, but the business driver behind them is kind of why I put them in those places. But the end result is I'm hoping people get an appreciation, some of you may already know, that PDF plays a role in all of these things. It's not just about the output side, and the diagram doesn't really show output necessarily specifically, but a lot of our customer use cases, or a lot of the use cases I see for PDF are on the ingestion side, lots of internal workflows, of course for archival, and of course for the output, but there's value for PDF across the entire information lifecycle. So that's what I'm hoping to show a little bit of today. So this first use case, I apologize for the eye chart. I think you can download these presentations afterwards. This one was about an energy company, as I mentioned before, names withheld. And again, it doesn't matter our customer or not, our technology or not. The idea is that they had volumes of content. In this specific project scenario, it was a bunch of well log files. So they've got all this information and research that's been done on the wells that they drill. They've got land asset management content. They've got all of these key areas of content. There's value buried in that stuff. If they've got something now that's properly creating the perfect output, it's properly tagged, it's perfectly searchable, it's in the right repository, going forward, that's fantastic. But most of these businesses have got legacy content that goes back decades, and there's still value in there. So this is one of these projects. They do have to figure it out going forward as well. They've got terabytes of legacy content that they need to understand what they've got, not just what documents they've got, but what information is buried in that content. Because the end result is, if they don't know what's in there, we've actually seen this. I'm not sure if we've heard this. I'm not sure if it's a true story or just a humorous anecdote. But we've heard from this industry that they've had experiences where they didn't realize they'd previously done the research and drilled a hole in basically exactly the same spot. And you can imagine the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars that's spent making that mistake because they didn't know they had the information somewhere buried in one of the legacy repositories. We had another customer in this industry too that actually had to bring people back from retirement because those people that went on retirement were the only ones that knew where to find the content. It was buried in certain places, but they were the only ones that knew where to find this stuff. They had to actually rehire these people out of retirement for a contract period, obviously, but to get this information back in so that they could then properly manage it and find it and leverage it in the future. So for this one, as I mentioned before, it was about classifying this content. In this case, it was standardizing all these different formats to PDF, making sure everything is searchable, but then also doing some smart things around, again, leveraging PDF to do some bucketing of content. Put similar documents into the same categories, the same buckets. And once you've got them in those categories and those buckets, you can start to do some intelligent extraction of content from the PDF. The PDF allows you to do these things, right? So it's true to the original, but now you've got this accessible content internally, properly tagged, and there's some things that the vendors can do to actually tag the PDF itself, fix the flow, so figure out the different columns, figure out what's a list, what's a table, identify the proper flow of the content through that, fix it, because as we heard yesterday, PDF is beautiful, but it does some interesting things. It's more of a painting of content, so you have to use some of the technologies available out there to properly fix the flow of content so that you can identify things. So if you're searching for a pattern, for example, not relevant to this example, but say you're looking for a credit card number, it starts at the bottom of one column, continues at the top of the next. If you do the default PDF, it's across the top, across the two columns. You're not going to find that information. But if you've got it fixed, and there's tools out there that can do this, fix the flow of the content, it can actually search for that pattern in the proper flow of the information. So now you can properly identify it. So they were doing this thing where you can actually group and extract information, and now you've got a much richer set of content, properly stored, properly tagged with metadata, properly findable in the organization, so now you can fully leverage it. So again, the business value here was that leveraging the PDF capabilities gave them the ability to understand potential asset reutilization opportunities. So as I mentioned, this idea of legacy oil wells. Any questions so far? Some of this I'm talking about? Okay. I see people nodding. It's good. Okay, so the second one that I wanted to talk about, and this is just perfect because I'm at about 30 minutes. So this one, which one was this? I should read my slides. Okay, so this is the big data analytics story that we talked about before. So imagine you're an insurance organization, you're dealing with tens of thousands of pages, tens of thousands of documents, contract-related, policy and contract-related stuff. Dealing with that stuff manually, coming in from all kinds of suppliers around the world, is just impossible. The volume is growing too quickly, the variety of formats is growing too quickly. It's just impossible to try and deal with that stuff manually. So what we're actually seeing is that people are leveraging PDF to unlock the value buried in unstructured content to reveal it to these big data analytics engines. So a lot of the articles that you'll read about big data analytics are really around structured content, and there's tons of it, right? Everything that we do is a transaction. It's a row and a column in a database somewhere. Everything that we do, there's a lot of value in doing big data analytics on that stuff. This is how Amazon does some predictive stuff. It tells you, based on your previous shopping experience, what it thinks you might be interested in. That's just doing big data analytics on all the rows and tables in a database. What we're actually seeing is that there's a huge potential to expose all that unstructured content, feed that into your analytics engines as well. So this is your email, your Word documents, your spreadsheets, your PowerPoints. All of that is still content. There's still value in that stuff. Expand the purview of what you're feeding into your analytics engines, you can get that much more value out of it. So that's really what this story was about. And in this example, one of their workflows is about doing contractual risk exposure for this insurance company. So they're feeding 500 million pages a year through technology and into IBM Watson so they can actually assess risk based on the content that's flowing in. So the types of contracts, the location, the types of incidents that are happening, all of this information is now being unlocked and fed into a big data analytics engine. So PDF plays a cool interim role in terms of feeding this stuff into these engines so that this business can make critical business decisions. They're able to assess risk. Again, it's 500 million pages a year, 500 million documents a year, that you can't do that manually. You have to do that in using technology. So PDF and the extracted content fed the analytics tools to improve their ability to identify, act on emerging trends, reduce pricing risk, and make informed and timely decisions. So again, it's just that's the outcome that they're after. PDF just happens to be a great format to get them there. The last one. So we do a lot in life sciences, although the major pharma companies live and breathe PDF. That's the format that has to be submitted to the FDA in the States and to the regulators in Europe as well. It has to be PDF, has to be perfect. So they're huge proponents of this format. So in this case, and we talked a little bit about, I'm just trying to think of the sessions, there were several sessions on the value of deploying PDF as kind of a shared service, a common platform, doing it at scale. These organizations have tens of millions of pages that they have to submit to the regulators, and they have to be perfect in terms of the hyperlinks have to be perfect, the bookmarks have to be perfect, the hyperlinks have to match, there have to be live hyperlinks in the footnotes. There's crazy amounts of sophistication that this industry demands to get. PDF is the perfect format for that. The whole goal is to create a submission that the FDA reviewers or whatever regulatory body are very, very easy to navigate. So PDF is perfect for that. It's true to the original format. It's got hyperlinks. It's got PDF bookmark structures. It's got all of that value. So they spend a huge amount of time and money making sure that this stuff is perfect. And the reason that they invest so much in this is because every day that they can put, now this is a major blockbuster type drugs, every day they can get to market sooner is worth $1.3 million to their bottom line. So we've got customers that had poor quality rendering initially, for example, so bad PDF slows things down, both in terms of the internal work, but also if you submit a bad PDF to the FDA or the regulator, you're going to increase your risk of potentially getting that refusal to file and send it back to you. Some customers are actually showing that they can go from 110 minutes per document in terms of review down to like 5 minutes per document. Again, leveraging PDF technologies to do that. And that, if you're able to shorten the cycle by weeks at $1 million a day, this industry is willing to invest in PDF-related technologies. So it's a really important one for them as well. So business value, leveraging the standardized high-quality PDF with the full navigation features that we're all familiar with, helps accelerate their time to market. So that's the business value of PDF, again, for the life sciences industry. So, again, as I mentioned before, hopefully I've painted a bit of a picture that all of these groups care about PDF for different reasons, but it does deliver huge amounts of business value, whether it's about risk or about improving profits. PDF workflows are critical to a lot of different industries. So, anyway, more than ever, we need to organize all data, extract as much value, and automate as much as possible. Most important, we need to make our content ready, whether that's for the machines to consume or for consumers to be able to digest it in terms of accessibility and tagging and whatnot. And that's it for me. Any questions? It's been a long 2 days, I realize. Thank you for hanging on. Okay, great. Thanks.
Any final questions? He's here now, just ask me. Yeah, one question there. Just a second.
I'm just wondering if you had any comments on the difference between PDF tagging and the semantics of the information and ontologies, because there's a big difference between a tagged PDF and actually having semantic understanding of the content. So some of your use cases seem to work much more having semantic understanding.
Sorry, I didn't put that on properly.
Yeah.
There we go. That's on now? Maybe? Okay. That's a good question. I don't have actually a good answer for you there. We are looking at, because when we look at tagging content, it's really for the purposes of being able to feed it into these processing engines, the analytics engines. It's not truly tagging it in the sense that we all want it to be, so that it's universally accessible. So it's not doing that proper tagging. But some of the new capabilities that I'm hearing about in PDF 2.0 introduce some new and interesting opportunities to do that kind of thing, whether it's our technology or we're doing one step and somebody else can actually do that proper semantic tagging. That would be really interesting. But we're getting closer all the time. So I'm pretty excited about the future, for sure, for the format and what it can do. Yeah. Sorry I didn't have a better answer for you there, but I'm not technical enough to give you a decent answer. So, anybody else? Good. Thanks all.
All right. Thanks, Scott.